host for this episode of Unidentified History. Dave Unger coming to you here tonight to do an episode that's probably a few days overdue, to be honest with you. Um, and of course, got to make sure my dogs aren't, there. Of course, going to be a distraction. But anyway, coming at you here tonight to talk to you about the James Fox National Press Club event that took place last Tuesday, so about 6 days ago. And I'm also going to touch bases a little bit on UAPCon that took place yesterday. That was hosted by UAPedia. I think the new UAP encyclopedia that's based on AI and a collaboration with people in AI and that sort of thing. But I wanted, and it's okay that I waited a few days to do this because what I really wanted to do a lot of the people I respect, most in this field, to kind of go through, see what they thought about some of these things, get their thoughts on the event because it was a pretty epic event, pretty important event in ufology and UAP studies and that sort of thing this past week. So I did all that and I waited around to do that and had a chance to get in here and finally do an episode on here. So I'm going to play a lot of video clips here, things from the event, other things like that I just kind of think are really important. There's going to be some aspects of this episode here tonight that are a little bit different for me because some of what was discussed at the press club event really leans into some of the more legalistic aspects of things. And people who know me in the real world or have podcasted with me for years, and all I've been seemingly doing the last couple of weeks are pro wrestling stuff and a little bit of Game of Thrones here and there and some of the more nerd based stuff you've seen the live broadcast. But the people who know me and a lot of people who I talk to on the UFO side of things and things like that know what I do in the real world. And I don't like to advertise too much that in the real world, I am an attorney. And in the real world, I've been an attorney for, gosh, this is 29 years now that I've been a practicing attorney. I don't like to talk about it too much because, I don't know, like 80% of the time, I don't think it's relevant at all to anything that's going on with UAPs or anything else I podcast about. It just doesn't really matter. This is a little different because there are some aspects of what happened at the press club event that do lean into legal stuff. And there's some aspects that I talk about on this episode that deal with constitutional law. There's an aspect of some of the of what I'll show you, a statement from one of the witnesses from the press club event that while I don't think it impeaches this guy's credibility, it's something to keep in mind as you go forward. So that's kind of what I want to do here tonight is go through some of these events, give you my own thoughts and perspectives, kind of bring together what I've heard the last week and see if it maybe in some small way helps to figure out, the impact of the event. And then, we will talk about UAP.com a little bit and get into all that. So that's what I want to do here tonight. And hopefully some of you guys will jump in here with me and we'll see what we can come up with. So here we go. All right. So first thing I want to do is so we'll start off with going to the press club event itself. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is the statement from Jacques Vallée. So Jacques Vallée comes out, and most of the clips I got here are from Ross Coulthart's feed. I don't know if it's the News Nation feed itself, but I got it from Ross's YouTube channel. So I'm sure it's one, 6 in one, half dozen in the other, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's any great difference between all that, but that's what I did here on this one, and I got it from Ross's stream. So at the outset of the press club event, Jacques Vallée gave a statement, and it was a pretty good statement. And there's an aspect of it that I want to play right now that I think is important because it got a lot of people talking, and a lot of people wondering, did Jacques Vallée change his opinion on the true nature of the phenomenon? Because as we know, for years and years, Jacques pretty much been of the opinion that this is an interdimensional sort of phenomenon. And as you will see in this video that I'm about to play here, he kind of turns that around a little bit to a certain extent. And then I've got some follow-up information about that. So if I can get this thing to play, which of course is always an interesting an interesting sort of endeavor. All right, so let's see. Let's listen. This is Jacques Vallée, the introductory message that he had at the National Press Club event. So let's okay.
As the Virginia case proves, allowing more open contact at an international level would yield better understanding of the global issues. The current segmentation of the data hinders any serious research into what appears to be an extraterrestrial phenomenon empowered by advanced artificial intelligence. Open archives do exist to some extent, describing the physical and biological environment of the crafts and their occupants. Socorro and Valensol in particular, two unclassified cases officially deemed unidentified by multiple government agencies, have yielded evidence of traces, recovered materials, and environmental effects. But we know that much more is available.
Okay, so like I said, that's something a little bit different for Jacques, who has been, the first time I honestly ever heard of the interdimensional hypothesis was through Jacques Vallée. I'd never heard of it before. I started reading his books, Passport to Magonia. He had that trilogy of books, Messengers of Deception, Forbidden Secrets is a little bit later on down the line. But, he's always been really big on the whole interdimensional hypothesis and really did not buy into the whole ET notion of things. And as you heard from that video clip, he's indicating that it's an extraterrestrial phenomenon with some very advanced AI possibly overlaying it, possibly superimposed upon it. And when he said that, a lot of us were kind of like, has Jacques Vallée changed his tune? Is this something different? Is he looking at this differently? Did something happen to change his perspective on this and to make it seem like, wow. So I'm just looking at the feed is not coming through very well, is it? It's very, very grainy and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's not good. You know what? I will. Okay. Well, it's kind of clearing up a little bit. So I don't know. I'm watching the replay. Maybe it gets better. But anyway, and so getting back to Jacques, though, the thought was, okay, is there something about these cases he's talking about, Socorro, Valensol? I know he mentions Trinity, which of course is a very controversial topic of conversation amongst many people. Is there something happened that made him look at the phenomenon differently and say, okay, there's something different happening, something's changed, something has shifted, that sort of thing. And so later on in the week, Joe Mergia, who goes by UFO Joe on X, he's very well known in the community, obviously, that sort of thing. He actually was able to reach out to Jacques by email and ask him some questions. And so let me read this for you. So this is from Joe Mergia, and this was back on, I'm not sure when this took place. It was a few days ago, like 4 days ago. So Joe ended up sending Jacques this email. And he said, today during the James Fox hosted Virginia press conference, you said the phenomenon appears to be an extraterrestrial phenomenon empowered by advanced artificial intelligence. Is that a change in your opinion on the origin of the phenomenon? Because over the years, you've talked about other realities and dimensions and leaned away from the ETH, which of course stands for extraterrestrial hypothesis. Looking for clarification that can post on Twitter X. Thank you. So forth and so on. Joe Mergia. Jacques, to Joe's credit, Jacques responded to him. Dear Joe, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. We have started to use AI quite actively, and we have to expect other species would as well and better. To me, the creatures seen at Trinity, Socorro, and Valensol, and now revealed quite clearly at Varginha, could be artificial biological robots designed to withstand our gravity, breathe our air, and look human-like enough to interact with us or simply to learn about us. Um, when I was discussing this with Bill Power circa 1966, right after Socorro, he half joked that they could be noticing machines. That could mean that any secret project designed to learn about their biology, although extremely interesting, will teach us nothing about the origin of UFOs, whose real controllers are somewhere else and have evolved like us. I've come to believe there are two levels involved at least. Always good to hear from you, Jacques. And again, kudos to Joe Merja for getting that information out of Jacques. So I think the big thing to take away from that is that Jacques Vallée is saying these are not mutually exclusive sorts of things. There could be more than one thing going on. In fact, there probably is more than one thing going on. There could be extraterrestrials who may, I mean, we always assume that the extraterrestrials are this physical form, whereas in reality, could it just be the consciousness of something that is being implanted into, like Jacques saying, AI-powered robots, androids, cyborgs, who the hell knows what it is, but that are coming here. They can interact with us. They can breathe our air. They deal with gravity and all that sort of stuff without any sort of extraterrestrial, like, being, entity, anything like that, putting themselves at risk by coming here in physical form. It's like, well, I'll just implant our consciousness into these robots, which is, ironically enough, it's one of the theories about what the Greys are, right? People think that the Greys are, I'm one of them who think that the Greys are more of a, like a synthetic AI sort of situation, like a AI hybrid, biological sort of thing. I don't know, but this makes a lot of sense to me. And I think what Jacques was saying is that it's not mutually exclusive. You don't have to, it's not like you have to have one and the other can't exist. Many people, and I'm probably one of them, think that there's multiple things going on here. There could be interdimensionals. There could be extraterrestrials. There could be extratemporal, aspects of things going on, time travelers, that sort of thing. It could be all at once. It could be none, that sort of thing. So I thought that, from the standpoint, though, so getting back to the original question, has Jacques Vallée changed his position on this? Yes and no, I think is the best way to answer this, because he's kind of like saying, he's at least recognizing that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is more plausible now, but he has kind of slanted it in the aspect of, well, there could be advanced AI involved. You got to remember, Jacques was doing AI before computers really were a thing. He was an AI expert before, like, AI was even a real thing. I mean, before home computing was a distant thought, like in the 60s and that sort of thing. And he was dealing with artificial intelligence then. Of course, it wasn't the AI that we think of now. So Jacques' always been very much tied into this sort of aspect of things. So, I thought it's a very interesting statement from him. Is it a shift in his philosophy? Maybe a little bit, not too much. And if he's broadening his horizons and thinking that there may be something else going on here, hey, he has earned the right to do that. And I'm certainly am in no position to challenge him on that sort of thing. So I thought right off the bat, that was a pretty big moment in the press club event that got things going pretty quickly. So I thought, okay, we're off and running here. Good stuff. Turning to the actual witnesses from Varginha, I thought they were all excellent. I thought they were very heartfelt. I felt they were very honest. I didn't get the feeling that there's a lot of embellishing going on. There are a few things that I have to complain. I don't know if complain's the word, but just a few things I noted. The big thing is most of what they said, if you actually watch James Fox's Moment of Contact, New Revelations, you would have gotten 90% of what they said from the movie. Because it really was that. They had said everything that almost everything that was said in the interviews and the statements and all that kind of stuff at the press club event, they're from the movie. So If you haven't seen the movie and you were seeing that for the first time, congratulations, because you got the full flavor of what some of these witnesses have gone through. And it's powerful. Do not get me wrong about this. I am not, I will tell you guys this right now, no matter what I say from here to the end of this episode, I want to make it clear. I believe these witnesses. Something obviously happened in Varginha 30 years ago. There's no doubt that something happened in Brazil 30 years ago. What it was, the true nature of what it was, that's going to be debated for a while. There's all sorts of, whether it was ET, whether it was, demons. I mean, I know Rodi Vernay has got a documentary coming out, and shout out to Pavel Ibarra, who's been covering that whole aspect of things. And Roni was smart enough to move that to the end of the month to not compete with what James was doing. I know that he's steering into the more spiritual aspect of things. And I learned that, of course, from watching Pavel's show all the time. So I don't know. I mean, I saw somebody saying it, disease monkeys. I mean, I've seen some crazy theories out there about what these things were. But all that aside, something obviously happened in Varginha all those years ago. And these witnesses have stuck to their story for all these years. They appear believable. They appear credible. There's an emotional aspect of this that is clearly impacting these folks. And, it's just that kind of thing where, you look at everything that's going on and you listen to these testimonies and you think, my gosh, how would you react to something like that if something had happened in that sort of way? I don't know. I mean, it's very, it's difficult to say, but I will say this, the stuff I want to complain about a little bit is, so what really sucks is that like 6 of them couldn't get their visas to come over to the United States to actually give their statements here. And I get it. Let's be honest. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, especially in the United States. And, you understand why, and I don't think it was because, that sort of thing, but, you understand why some of the visas may have been held up and that they couldn't come across. And it doesn't seem like it was anything done out of ill will or like, retaliatory because they were going to talk about UFOs or anything like that. It's just the nature of the United States right now. You're not getting in here unless you already live here. It's going to be very difficult for anybody who's not full-fledged American citizen to get in here. So I get all that. But you look at the stuff like Carlos de Souza's statement where he saw the crash and he waited he vanished for 26 years before he comes back, and you could tell it impacts him. And if you watch the movie, you could tell it impacted him greatly when he finally realized that he had come upon the place where the crash had taken place. It's very impactful for him. Dr. Italo Venturelli, the neurosurgeon, we'll talk about him in a minute. But here's where some of the legal stuff that I talked about comes in here a little bit. So all the witnesses who couldn't get to the United States are giving, and I'm air quoting, sworn statements, because they're not really sworn statements. Everybody's raising their right hand and saying, I swear to tell the truth and all that stuff. And that's fine. That's great. Here's the problem with that, though. In my legal career, I've done hundreds of depositions, like literally hundreds. The witnesses always get sworn in at the beginning of these things to tell the truth. And there's a penalty of perjury that attaches to that. And the problem with the witnesses here is that, yes, they're raising their right hand and saying, I swear to tell the truth. The issue there is that we don't know who was administering the oath, if anybody. There has to be somebody with the legal authority to administer the oath to sit there and say, you are now subject to penalty of perjury if you lie. This is what happens with court reporters in the United States. They are authorized to administer the oath, and it becomes a formal legal proceeding and that sort of thing. And when we start the depositions out, I will admonish the witnesses. You understand this is blah blah blah, and you're under penalty of perjury. And if you lie, you can be subject to fraud, perjury, so forth and so on. You didn't really have that as far as we know. I don't know who said raise your right hand and you promise that everything you say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You didn't see any of that off camera. The other problem is these witnesses, none of them are subject to the United States laws. So, the U.S. has a law and penalty of perjury. It doesn't matter because they're not really subject to that. Was it a cool gesture to see? Sure. Did it add some credibility to them that they were swearing in a video statement that they were telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Sure, absolutely. But it's still that idea that, and again, I want to clarify again, I am absolutely saying I believe these witnesses. I am not questioning their credibility at all. I'm just throwing this out there for food for thought, consideration about this whole event, because that's what I've spent the last few days just thinking about stuff like this. And, does it impact things? Probably not, because they may have thought that they were really under some sort of compulsion to tell the truth. I don't know. But that's kind of the interesting thing about that. But all the witnesses, they really testified effectively. You had Carlos de Sousa, you had Venturelli gave his statements, and de Sousa and Venturelli were actually there. They actually got to go to D.C. But, when you watch these guys, and like de Sousa's statement for the video one, where he's saying, I'm not lying, I'll take a lie detector test, I'll do all this stuff. Okay, when, in my experience, if people are telling the truth, they don't have to make a statement like that. Most people aren't inviting a polygraph test and say, I'm telling the truth, give me a lie detector test. Most people don't do that. Somebody may ask them to do that and submit to that, and that's a different story entirely. But it's like they're almost trying too hard to get people to believe them, and they shouldn't have to do that. But it does. I don't know if it doesn't impeach their credibility. Does it damage their credibility? Maybe a little bit. And again, I'm not saying I don't believe them, but there's an aspect of that's going on that when you watch over that and you think, okay, what was actually happening there? What it was, the whole notion of this sort of thing. Was anything else going on? You got to take that into consideration. So one of the things that I caught, and I want to bring this up because this actually happened during the Q&A section of this thing. So actually, no, I take that back. Let's go to something else first. It's a bigger moment before we get to the Q&A, where we do get some discussion as to what happened to Marco Scerese. I believe I'm pronouncing that right, or at least I'm coming close to that, to pronouncing it correctly. And what happened to him, why he died, the cause of death, that sort of thing. So we did get some further information about that. And this is very fascinating to me, because, you get to hear about what went wrong. And there's all sorts of, thoughts and things about that. Marco Scerese, you got, I think, let's see, what doctor segment? I think it was Dr. Armando Fortunato, I believe is the doctor's name, who talked about what had happened to Scerese and what had killed him. So let's take a listen in real quick. Listen to what this doctor has to say, because it is fascinating stuff to figure out, okay, what actually went wrong. So let's give a listen into that, and we'll come back in just a minute.
Esquerda.
It was considered unusual that a young, healthy soldier would die as a result of what appeared to be a simple abscess in the underarm area.
Realizei a autópsia e encaminhei fragmentos de órgãos e amostras de sangue ao meu colega, o renomado médico patologista, Dr. João Batista Macuco Janini, para avaliações laboratoriais e maiores esclarecimentos.
I sent organ fragments and blood samples to my colleague, the renowned pathologist, Dr. João Batista Janini, for laboratory assessment and further clarification.
Foi observada uma cicatriz recente na região axilar esquerda, decorrente de uma drenagem cirúrgica de uma lesão infecciosa.
A recent scar was observed in the left underarm region as a result from a surgical drainage of an infectious lesion.
O paciente faleceu poucos dias depois, apesar de ter sido avaliado e tratado por outros médicos, com doses elevadas de anti-inflamatórios e de antibióticos.
The patient died a few days later, despite having been evaluated and treated by other physicians with high doses of anti-inflammatory medications and antibiotics.
Como tratava-se de uma bactéria altamente virulenta e multiresistente, a infecção evoluiu rapidamente, espalhando-se pelo corpo, resultando em choque séptico e na morte do jovem soldado.
As the infection was caused by a highly virulent and multi-drug resistant bacterium, it progressed rapidly, spreading throughout the body and resulting in septic shock.
So yeah, a virulent antibiotic resistant form of bacteria or something along those lines. And I'm listening to that, and what the first thing that jumps to my mind is a super aggressive form of MRSA. And MRSA's a really nasty thing that you see people. It's a resistant sort of infection that people get, and it is just nasty stuff, and it can kill if it's not treated. And the problem with that statement, if it's not treated, is that how do you treat it? And you see MRSA a lot in like prison scenarios and things like that, and like inmates, and this stuff gets around, and like I know like some of like detention officers and things like that. They get like, if they end up contracting MRSA while they're doing their job, it's like presumed to be like work related and that sort of thing out here in California in some places. But that's what this sounded like, a very aggressive form of something like a MRSA sort of infection. MRSA is, by the way, MRSA, if you guys want to look that up. And no, I'm not going to spell it all out here. It's just because it's just too long of a thing to talk about. But there's also, I know one of the witnesses was talking about that they want to exhume the body of Shereze and perhaps run testing on it, run DNA testing on it. Now, whether his sister's going to go along with that, I imagine she will. But, you also have to understand that he's been in the ground for nearly 30 years. What sort of degradation of any sort of meaningful sample are you going to get from this sort of situation? And look, I'm no forensic pathologist or anything like that. Whatever branch of medicine is going to be looking at this thing. But I got to imagine that, if somebody's been in the ground for 30 years through decomposition process and everything like that, sure, there's going to be stuff in the bones and things like that. But, what quality sample are you really going to get from that? So I'll be as fascinated as anybody to see what they come up with on this thing. But the thing to remember is this was just like they're saying, it's just an abrasion on the underarm that just went crazy, and they loaded this guy up with antibiotics. It had no effect, and he ends up succumbing to this and dying in remarkably quickly too. It's a tragic circumstance, but whatever the case is, something got into him that I'm not going to go so far as to say for sure it was not of this planet, but if it was something like a MRSA infection on steroids, yeah, that's going to take you out really quickly. And to be quite honest, to think about it, when you start looking at when MRSA started to become a real issue in America and around the world, and I don't know if it was I mean, I got to look it up, but somebody can look it up if they want to. If MRSA became a thing around like 1997 or something, you got to raise an eyebrow about that and say, did these beings bring that here? So anyway, it was fascinating stuff there to listen to what happened this stuff led to septic shock, and that's what eventually killed Shirazi. So it's a very interesting, tragic situation to look into. So cool stuff there. Well, not cool stuff, tragic stuff, but very interesting to listen to these the doctor talk about that. Now I want to go to what I was talking about with previously, the Q&A section that came up at the end, and kind of the issue that I had with one of the things that was said. So in the Q&A, somebody had, and we're going to play it right here, and it was a question asked to Dr. Venturelli. Now, we all know the issues with Dr. Venturelli. He had originally said that he did not see the non-human entity he didn't see it personally. He saw it through a video. He changed his story, and it comes out in the new James Fox movie. And the reason he changed his story to say all about how he was in the room with him, he treated we'll just call it an alien for lack of a better, non-human entity, NHI, whatever you want to call it. He treated the NHI, got a telepathic communication. The description of the NHI that he gave differs from what the girls gave, but of course, the girls in the square who saw him next to the graffiti, the wall that had the graffiti on it, said it was brown, kind of like almost like salamander-like, very bad smell to it, possibly excreting stuff through its pores. Venturelli says that the being that he encountered in the hospital was more white. It was calm. There was no bad odor to it, which contradicts other people saying that from the hospital that there was such a bad odor that it took weeks to get rid of it. Now, could they have brought in deceased ones or ones that were in distress as opposed to the one that Dr. Venturelli encountered? Sure, that's a possibility. But he talks about his experience with this being, and the reason he said he changed his story was because he survived a pretty massive heart attack. And I know in the movie they talked about another one of his doctors, and I think we talked about it on the year in ufology, the year-end episode we did, where a doctor who had passed away had a heart attack. He passed away, and then this big cardiac event happens to Dr. Venturelli. He has the fear of God put into him, and he's like, I'm not going to go to the grave with this thing on my mind. I'm going to tell the truth about this thing. Okay. And you can believe that. I could buy that. I could see why somebody would have this massive event that just scared the shit out of him, and said, I really don't want to go to my grave with this secret on my chest. I want to tell somebody about it because he thinks this was a magnificent, angelic sort of creature. So I get all that, and honestly, I buy that. It is not it's not like a dying declaration sort of thing, which is like an exception to the hearsay rule for the lawyers out there or people study the law. There's an exception to the hearsay rule that says that if somebody's like on their deathbed and they make a confession about the cause of death, like if they say if they're on their death, he shot me, that sort of thing, that is a dying declaration, and that sort of statement gets around the hearsay rule. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered to prove or offer proof for whatever's being asserted, generally inadmissible in a court of law, unless you've got an exception. Dying declaration would be one of those exceptions. So it's not really what's going on here, but it is a situation where somebody has had a traumatic event that has impacted their mindset, and it's impacted, their thoughts about what they want to talk about as a specific event. So I get all that. I really do. But what I want to play for you, the part that kind of, I don't know if concerned me is the right word for it, but there's an aspect of what Dr. Venturelli says here that is it is concerning because, like I said, again, I'm stressing, I don't think this impeaches her credibility. Does it damage her credibility? Possibly. And so I want to play this for you and get your thoughts on it. And, we'll go through this and see what's going on, but I want to play this part for you. And then we'll talk about, we'll go into a little bit more of the legalese sort of aspects of things and just my own experience when witnesses do this sort of thing. Because it's happened to me. And I've seen it happen before. But I do want to go and talk about this. So let's play this, and we'll come right back and talk about this. So here we go.
Thank you all so much for being here, for your courage, and for speaking your truth. This question is for Dr. Italo. Dr. Italo, have you had any sort of contact with any non-human intelligence, whether it's an alien or an angel, since your contact experience in Virginia 30 years ago? And if so, what was that like? Can you give us some details? If not, thank you anyway.
Obrigada pela sua coragem em si, desde o seu encontro com você no CPI, se você teve algum encontro desde então, ou para o senhor descrever mais sobre como é que foi a sua interação com ele.
Ok. Desde o momento que eu entrei naquela sala,
Since when I entered that intensive care room,
foi algo inesperado para mim. Eu estava esperando ver um paciente.
it was something unexpected to me because I was expecting to see a patient.
Mesmo quando a gente vê pacientes humanos, muitas vezes a gente fica interessado em saber o que aconteceu com os pacientes. Eu, pelo menos, moro perto do hospital. Eu volto, mesmo não estando em plantão, eu volto para ver como é que os pacientes estão.
Even when we have human patients, we're always curious to see how they're doing. So he lives nearby the hospital, and even when it's not his shift, he will come back around to the hospital to check on his patients.
Isso é importante para nós, para vermos o desenvolvimento, se nós acertamos, como que ficou. A gente torce para que os pacientes melhorem.
It's important for them to see the evolution of the patients and how they're getting better, because they're very interested in seeing them get through their sicknesses.
No caso deste, mentalmente eu volto lá todo dia.
And on this case, mentally, he goes back to the room every day.
Eu sonho, que essa noite eu sonhei, será que o potássio dele está baixo? Como é que está?
This past night, he actually dreamed about the potassium levels of this being in the room.
Claro, é um pensamento, eu não tenho contato telepático.
It's just a thought. I
é
don't have telepathic
É
communication.
um pensamento, mas parece que toda vez que eu passo naquela sala, parece que eu quero examiná-lo ali.
It's a thought, but for him, every time he walks past that room, he wants to go in and examine this being.
Não acontece só com o caso dele. Tem crianças que a gente atende, né? Ficam na mente da gente. Parece que a gente escolhe algumas pessoas, alguns pacientes que a gente parece que vira parente. A gente quer saber sempre como que está, se melhorou. E no caso dele, eu trabalho ao lado do quarto onde eu vi ele. Então eu passo toda hora naquela janela e vejo se ele está na janela.
Not only with this case, but when he operates on children, for example, there are certain patients that he feels more affinity with. So with this one, because he works on the room right next to the room where the being was, that's a constant thing in his mind.
Yes.
But so to answer the question that he asked, it sounds like you haven't had further contacts with any other beings since that moment.
Então parece que você não teve mais contato com outros seres
Não,
depois desse momento.
Não tive não.
Okay.
Yeah, because he didn't. He chose to go more into describing what that being was.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Obrigado.
Okay, so Dr. Italo there is what we call non-responsive. And you got to see it like at the very end of that, the moderator basically just kind of gets him back on track saying, okay, but to answer the question, you haven't had any contact or anything like that. And then he says, no, I have not. And like I said, does it impeach his credibility? No. Is it something to keep an eye on? I think probably, because to me, when people are non-responsive to questions, like in a deposition where I ask, and this happens a lot, you ask somebody a question and they don't listen to the question because they're so focused on the story they want to tell you, right? And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes people aren't exactly honest and they've got a story that they want to tell you. And so they tell you this story and they don't actually listen to the question. And this segment here with Dr. Italo he was so intent on telling the story that he wanted to tell, which is his interactions with the being. And he's so driven to make you believe that he's telling the truth that he says it through the interpreter, that he made the choice to talk about his experience with the being rather than answer the question that was being asked of him. So that is a problem. I got to be honest with you guys. That is a problem when somebody does that. Because it is when somebody is that dead set on getting their story across. And like I said, and please don't destroy me. I mean, you guys can come at me if you want, but I'm just being honest. This is just my observations. It's either you get one of two options. Either he's lying and he's trying to convince you he's telling the truth, or he's trying to impart to you the heartfelt belief that he has in the truth of this experience that he had so much that he's so locked in on a certain aspect that he just isn't listening to whatever else is going on around him. So again, it bugged me because it's like, you're not answering the question. This is non-responsive to what was being asked of you. Why are you doing that? But like I said, the interpreter said he made the choice to go in that direction. Again, does it destroy his credibility? Of course not. It doesn't do that. But is it something to keep in the back of your mind? Is it something to be aware of? Is it something that you look at because I say this all the time to people in this topic, specifically the UFO topic, where so many people will sit there and say, oh, witness testimony isn't evidence. Bullshit. It is. In every court of law in the world, witness testimony is evidence. People have been sent to the electric chair, to the gas chamber, to the gallows, to the guillotine, whatever you want, based on witness testimony. It happens. Now, where this becomes relevant is from the standpoint of weighing the credibility of the witnesses, the strength of that testimony, right? And that's where this comes into play, where you look at this thing and you say, okay, how powerful is this witness testimony? How much weight do I give this? On a scale of 1 to 10, does this drop it from like a 10 to a 6 or 7? Maybe. But, if he come out and the question was asked of him, have you had any further contact with any entities, angels or aliens or anything like that? And he'd just say, no, nothing since that day. Okay. A little underwhelming of an answer, to be sure, because you don't get all the other details. But it would have been honest, and it would have been responsive to the question. So again, I go back to it. When you're looking at the witness testifying, does this impact the strength of that testimony? Does it impact the credibility of the testimony? Does it impact how some neutral, objective observer would look at this and say, how much weight do I give to this witness? I think if you're being honest, you have to say, yeah, it kind of does. But again, it doesn't take away from the fact that I absolutely believe what Dr. Italo said. And I believe what Carlos de Sousa said. And I believe what the girls said. And I believe what the mother said, where they offered a shit ton of money to keep their mouths shut. Probably. That sounds about right. But anyway, those are things about the witnesses, the Brazilian witnesses, who I wanted to comment upon because, like I said, most of that stuff you'd seen in the movie, and it was cool to have De Sousa there and Dr. Italo there, to see them in person and to just watch their interactions and their body language as somebody who, to cut against my own argument, their body language is such that when you watch them and you watch what they're talking about, their body language is very much. I got ghosts in here opening doors and stuff. You guys don't care. But when you watch these guys and what are they doing, and their body language, it invokes a sense of emotion, and people who are really emotional about this whole thing and heartfelt and that sort of thing. So I found that part very interesting. So let's shift away from the Brazilian witnesses. Let's go to the American witnesses, because I honestly think that there's 3 things I want to talk about here, and I think these are the more powerful aspects of the James Fox event. And the first one is Colonel Clausen. So Colonel Clausen came out here, and he dropped a bombshell on people, and I'm going to play his segment for you because it's so important to think about the fact that a C-17, I think it's a C-17 transport, comes into Brazilian airspace unauthorized, picks up the beings and takes off. And Colonel Clausen's going to tell you all about the paper trail that probably exists from this event. So let's get into Colonel Clausen's testimony here. Not testimony, well, I guess it is kind of testimony. He wasn't under oath either, but you guys know what I mean. His statement here. Let's take a listen because it is very important to hear what Clausen has to say here. So let's go and get into it.
My name is Fred Clausen. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force bird colonel and fighter pilot. I have more than 4,000 hours of flying time in the F-15, the F-4, and I flew combat missions in the F-105 during the Vietnam conflict. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross twice and held a top secret SCI clearance. While flying the F-15, I intercepted a UFO. I took gun camera film, which was immediately confiscated. But that's another story for another time. Today, I am speaking on another matter, a matter that requires world attention. According to several Brazilian authorities, including Air Traffic Controller Marcos Freires, on or about the 20th of January, 1996, a U.S. Air Force cargo plane, most likely a C-17, took off from a base in the U.S. and it flew secretly into Brazilian airspace without flight clearance from Brazilian government, and it landed at Viracopos Airport in Campinas. While at Campinas, witnesses talked of it loading an unusual cargo, then departing to an unknown location in the United States. If true, I am certain that 30 to 40 Americans had direct knowledge of this flight and its purpose. I will now walk you through a potential paper trail this mission could have left behind. In order to secure a cargo plane, a specific protocol must be adhered to. The tasking would be sent to Air Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, who has command authority over all U.S. Air Force cargo aircraft and refueling tankers. A paper trail has begun. Air Mobility Command transmits a mission order to the Air Mobility Wing at Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina. Another paper trail. At Charleston, a crew is selected for the mission and a C-17 cargo aircraft is made ready. The distance from Charleston to Campinas, Brazil is roughly 4,500 miles. The unrefueled range of a C-17 is about 2,500 miles. Therefore, air refueling by KC-135 would be required. More people in the know and another paper trail. An international flight plan to Brazil is required, even if the mission is classified. Paper trail. On board the C-17 is a minimum crew of a pilot, co-pilot, and loadmaster. But due to the nature of the mission, probably more, maybe CIA and a general officer. The C-17 lands at Campinas and must be refueled. Who pays for the fuel? And where's the receipt? Before departing Campinas, another international flight plan must be filed. Again, more paper trail. The C-17 flies back to the United States with tanker support and lands at an undisclosed location. As you can see from this possible scenario, I estimate that at least 30 to 40 Americans have direct knowledge of this mission. So here's my plea today. If you were a participant and have knowledge of the mission, come forward. You're probably retired now, in your 70s, maybe a little older like me, and have languished for 30 years with this knowledge. Come forward. We know this mission happened, and you know it too. Come forward. The time is now. Thank you.
So there you go. Lots of stuff there that Colonel Clausen talked about. 30 to 40 people that he thinks knows about this secret clandestine mission that ended up going into Brazil to retrieve an unusual cargo, I think is what he said, right? So he's talking about 30 to 40 people. He's talking about multiple places where a paper trail or some sort of documentation of this event would have taken place. Where are those records? And I know that I think it's in this press club event near the end, James Fox talks about how they did a FOIA request to get this information, to try and find the paper trail, the documentation of all this shit. And they got a response straight from the CIA themselves saying, we can, the standard, we can neither confirm nor deny that this event actually happened. And therefore your request is denied. Now, whether James is going to appeal that, whether he's going to employ the services of somebody like John Greenwald from Black Vault, or Dustin Slaughter, or one of these guys who are FOIA experts, I don't know. But probably if you got the CIA involved, they're going to fight that pretty hard. And he goes back to the aspect of, well, why? If there's nothing to fight here, if there's nothing to hide, why are we being so secretive? Well, you know the answer to that. But that's a fascinating suggestion. And then the call at the end that Clausen makes, which is very powerful. And we get a few of these powerful statements that are being made in this event, where Clausen is appealing to the 30 or 40 people, come forward if you know anything about this, noting that, people involved are, 70 years old or possibly older like him. They've lived with this secret for all these years. They're probably retired. Kind of appealing to the whole thing. Do you want to take this big secret to the grave, or do you want to do something that's really remarkable and important for humanity, for mankind, and that sort of thing? Don't know. But he does make a very compelling case why they should come forward, why they should talk about what they know. And let's get to the bottom of this thing. But just the fact that, up until this had kind of come down, you weren't really sure. There'd been rumors about it, but now you've got a full bird colonel, who actually had a dogfight. Apparently, what I understand is he had a dogfight with the UAP. He had lock on this thing and was waiting for the order to fire. Now, thankfully, that order didn't come across because, he probably wouldn't have been around to talk about this event all these years later. But still, it's pretty remarkable to listen to this, and he's pretty credible dude. I mean, you look at this guy, he's like what, 80 years old? What is his motivation to come forward and just lie at this point in his life? His career's done, he's retired. Why would you come forward at the end of your life, basically, and just make yourself sound like a crazy person? It doesn't make any sense unless it's just this sort of thing where I'm at, I'm getting up there in years. I don't have that much time left. I don't want to, take this stuff to the grave with me. There's a bigger issue going on here. I want to tell somebody about it. And that's what this feels like to me. I mean, sure, the question of, well, why did it take so long to come forward? Well, he kind of explains it in this whole thing. And his imploring of other people to do the same thing as well. So pretty powerful stuff all the way around. So let's go into the next thing I want to talk about, and that is Kirk McConnell. And Kirk McConnell, man, this one got a lot of people talking, and for good reason. And this is where the real legalese, the aspect of things for me, comes into play here. Because I picked up on what Kirk said. I'm going to play it in a minute for you. And I thought it was the most important aspect of the press event for multiple reasons. And shout out for the second time in this episode to Joe Mergia, UFO Joe, because he was very complimentary of me when I pointed this out, that what Kirk McConnell says here is vitally important. And Joe was like, I'm glad somebody else realized how important what he said is. And, you know, Pavel has done a whole episode on what Kirk says, so I'm not the only one who caught on to this thing. But I'm going to play this for you, and this, to me, is the most important part of the James Fox Press Club event. All the witness testimony is great, powerful, awesome stuff. You know, really gets you thinking. But what Kirk McConnell says here in this video that I'm going to play is so critically important, because it puts pieces on the board, right? And, you know, it put pieces on the board, and now you got to wonder who's going to assume the role of these pieces and how do we get to where we need to be. But let's get into this thing, and then I will add some context and some things that I've heard other people talk about this, but I'm going to add some new nuances that I think Kirk McConnell's statement from a legal standpoint and what I know about constitutional law and that sort of thing. And I think that this comes in, it's pretty important to listen to. So we're going to get into Kirk's statement as soon as it loads up here, and we'll play that. And then I will offer you guys my thoughts on this. So here we go. Let's get into Kirk's statement. Come on here. Okay, here we go.
However, and this point cannot be emphasized strongly enough, whistleblowers very likely do not need to fear prosecution for providing classified information about legacy programs to Congress, provided that they do so through secure channels. That is to say, you don't just tell them in a foyer of a Capitol Hill building. You need to arrange to be in a sensitive compartmented information facility, in a SCIF. Okay, so what I mean to say is that laws and regulations are very clear on this point. NDAs prohibit sharing classified information with unauthorized individuals. But Congress is, by statute and regulations, an authorized recipient of classified information. NDAs cannot legally be used to withhold classified programs or associated wrongdoing from congressional oversight. This is explicit in law and regulation. Furthermore, the executive branch is required by law to report all special access and compartmented programs to Congress, regardless of their sensitivity. Failure to comply with these laws is unlawful and unconstitutional, certainly in the view of Congress. NDAs cannot be used as a shield to evade these obligations. Now, presidents have claimed, in quotes, plenary Article II authority over sensitive national security information. Plenary, if you look it up in the dictionary, means total, unfettered, unlimited, and so on. But this is an inferred power, not an explicit constitutional grant. That is, you don't see language in the Constitution that states this. Congress holds equally strong Article I authorities, entitling it to the information it needs to legislate. I'm confident personally that the government would lose any serious legal challenge asserting that Congress is not authorized to receive sensitive classified information covered by executive branch non-disclosure agreements. In reality, for the reasons cited, although officials may threaten prosecution, as far as I can tell, and those of other colleagues that I've worked with on this, no one has ever been prosecuted for providing classified information to Congress. Such a prosecution would require showing harm to national security, a claim nearly impossible to sustain when the disclosure is made to Congress itself. For these reasons, I believe the government would not pursue legal actions against whistleblowers who provide protected UAP disclosures to Congress in a secure setting. Judges, Congress, and the American people would not tolerate prosecuting individuals for revealing truths that demonstrate Congress has been misled, has been lied to about issues of profound importance. But the fear of such actions, this Alice in Wonderland dynamic, remains a powerful deterrent, and it must be addressed. So what can be done? There is, in fact, a straightforward solution. With the stroke of a pen and a public statement, even a social media post, the president could explicitly affirm that federal law allows protected disclosures to Congress, because Congress is an authorized recipient of classified information covered by NDAs. It could be that simple. If the president or his cabinet members will not make this clear, then Congress should. In addition, congressional committees already possess the authority to grant immunity in exchange for testimony. That is to say, NDAs aside, if you appear in front of a congressional committee that has offered you immunity for your testimony, you cannot be prosecuted for doing so.
So, quite a bit to unpack there, right? Wow, where to begin? So, the first things that jump out to mind is that I know that Kirk is probably getting his information, or a lot of information, from Danny Sheehan, Dylan Guthrie, and that sort of thing, who I know are researching this and looking into it. And quite frankly, I agree with them on this point. I think that Congress certainly has the right under Article 1 of the Constitution to receive this confidential information. And they should be able to receive it without, fear of, I don't know about retaliation, but it's interference from the executive branch. But it's not that simple. And this is where you get into some of these issues that have taken place. And I go back to the hearing in September and Joe Spielberger, who was there for Pogo, and his written statement talking about how we have to get around this case that has been on the books for 30, 40 years. I don't know, this case that is the Department of Navy versus Egan. It's a 1988 Supreme Court decision that this case has been used by the executive branch to kind of claim this plenary authority that McConnell was talking about, this absolute power, that it's only the president is the only one who has the authority to receive or to designate who can receive national security confidential information. And Joe, I know, was talking about that we need to overturn this decision. But let me read something that Pogo put out, I believe it was in December of 2023, which kind of outlines some of the issues here, okay? And I'll put the links to all this stuff when I actually do the full show and the description and all that stuff. But Supreme Court decided Egan based purely on statutory grounds despite commenting on the president's authority under Article 2. The court held, after reviewing statutory language and legislative history, that there was inadequate evidence to show that Congress at that time intended to authorize the Merit Systems Protection Board, the MSPB, to review the merits of agency decisions concerning security clearances. So it's a little different issue. Nevertheless, Egan's discussion of the president's Article 2 powers is often cited to argue that the president has, get this, exclusive power to control access to national security information. This misinterpretation not only denies clearance holders their day in court, but also empowers executive branch officials to deny members of Congress access to classified information, curtailing Congress's ability to exercise its own Article 1 powers. While the executive branch indeed has a compelling interest to protect government secrets, nowhere in Egan did the court hold that the executive branch has unchecked power over classified information. Rather, in addition to the president's Article 2 authority, Egan explicitly recognizes Congress's constitutional authority under Article 1 to legislate and further define national policy regarding classified information. Underscoring the fact that control of classified information does not rest solely in the executive branch, the court held that courts will be reluctant to interfere with the president's authority over national security members unless Congress specifically has provided otherwise. And therein lies the rub. And I know some of you guys are going to be like, what the hell did all that mean? And I get it, because it's very legalese in nature. The thing is, what Egan stands for, the proposition, is that the Supreme Court does not want to get involved in deciding a pissing contest between the executive branch and Congress as to who has the right to receive this information. They don't want to do it. And there's a good reason. Why would you want the Supreme Court to get involved? There's checks and balances. And if the branches of government can't at least get along with each other to that extent, look, as an attorney, I will tell you this. You don't want to leave this in the hands of the court. There's a lot of things that it's fine to send it to the jury or the judge. This is not one of those things. And this kind of ties into some of the stuff I've heard, which is, people saying, well, gosh, Kirk McConnell said it's all this stuff. So why don't these whistleblowers just go into a skiff and tell all? Eric Davis sitting there saying, if the president waives me of all my NDAs, I would spill my guts. Well, according to Kirk McConnell, and according to some legal authority, and I happen to agree with this, Dr. Davis doesn't need to do that. He just needs to go in a skiff, say, okay, Congress, I think you have the right to receive this information. Here's everything I know. Now, Kirk was very quick to point out, you can't just, be walking down the street in D.C. saying, hey, let me tell you all about these UAPs. It's got to be in a skiff, that sort of thing. But, according to him, Dr. Davis could do that, could go into a skiff, and he could spill all of his guts, tell all the secrets, everything that he knows, that he says, if the president waived my NDA, I would tell it. According to Kirk McConnell and this thing I just read from Pogo about the Supreme Court, Dr. Davis, you don't need that shit. You can just go into a skiff and tell everybody everything. The problem with that is, what if Kirk's wrong? And what if it is the executive branch that has the plenary absolute authority, and it's the president, and he's the only one who can designate that, and the only one who can say, yes, you have the right to receive this information. You have it, not you, but you, that sort of thing. Who's going to take that chance? Because if you're wrong, if Kirk is wrong, and it really is just the executive branch, then you have violated the Espionage Act, which is punishable by death. And who's going to take that chance? And I know, when this first came up and I was, exchanging some messages with Joe Mersha about it, I flat out said that, I said, look, if Dylan Borland or Matthew Brown or David Grush came to me and said, what do you think? Would you challenge this thing? Would you take your chances? I would flat out tell them no. And I know Dylan and I exchanged, a little message back and forth on X about this, and he was very complimentary of me. And I think Dylan is a fantastic guy, and he's been through enough, that sort of thing. Would I tell him, hey, man, put it all on the line and let's hope that Kirk's right? No, I would not tell him that. I would tell him, don't do it. And the main reason for that is that whole situation. Well, what if McConnell and Pogo is wrong about this situation? And then where does that leave you? That sort of thing. And the thing is, I can't, as an attorney, I could never advise my client to take that risk, because if there is a lawsuit involved, and although the Supreme Court doesn't want to get involved, the composition of the Supreme Court right now is such that they would almost certainly side with the executive branch, because Trump appointed most of them. So you can't do it. I mean, when the court's got a different composition, maybe you take that chance. Now, here's the other thing. You wouldn't necessarily have to be a whistleblower who brings a situation to a head. Congress could theoretically sue the executive branch for declaratory relief, which is basically like they're trying to get an issue decided as to the whole issue. Well, who does have the right to receive this information? It would be tricky and it would be involved. But here's the other flip side of that, is it may not have to be Congress who does this. Because let's be honest, we're talking about the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And if somebody was to test this and Congress was to go to them and say, we think we have the right to receive this information and, screw you, that sort of thing. Then he, and I see Whistling Mike is on here, and he's messaging me, hey Mike, whatever you want to talk about, man, jump on in here. I'll be sure to answer this. But thing is with President Trump, if Congress was to say we think we have the right to receive this information, and Trump said, we're talking about Donald Trump here, he's not going to take kindly to anybody saying we can do this and you can't tell us not to. You could get a situation where the executive branch would initiate this, and then you get the same sort of scenario. So it's a slippery slope, and it's a tough decision. But yeah, I just think it's not realistic to expect any whistleblower, to come forward and just say, fuck it, I'm going to throw it all on the line. I think these guys are right. I'm going to go into this skiff. I'm going to, say everything I know and hope that, McConnell and the rest of these guys are right. They probably are. There is a lot to believe that Congress's Article 1 powers are at least comparable to the Article 2 stuff. But again, it's so difficult because, Mike's asking what court system would that go through? What does that court look like in favor of signing? Yeah, this is what I was talking about, Mike. It has to go through the Supreme Court. And, based on the composition of the Supreme Court right now, you kind of like you're asking who are they going to side with? They're going to side with the executive branch right now. If you're going to go through that sort of a scenario where you're suing somebody and, and it's the Supreme Court deciding this thing, well, the ultimate question of who has the right to receive this information. Is it only the president? Is it the president and his designated appointees? Or does Congress have the right to receive that? And the thing is, if you press this issue to the Supreme Court right now with their composition, like I said, I think that they side with the executive branch. And that's too big of a risk for any of the whistleblowers, anybody like Mike, like Dave Grush, like a Dylan Borden, like a Matthew Brown. You don't set somebody up for that sort of thing. If there's a way to get that in front of a court where it's just branch versus branch and nobody's got their ass on the line, then, maybe you do that. But how do you actually get to that point? Only better than having a good lawyer is having a good judge on your side. Yeah, that's the problem with this thing is that, and like I said, it's a question of timing, I think, on this thing. It's something that, and look, I've listened to Danny Sheehan. He talked about it with Andy McGrillen on that UFO podcast where he mentioned and talked about this constitutional fight is coming, and that's what this is all about. It is a constitutional issue where, that they're going to have to do this sort of thing where you get in here and you've got the Supreme Court that's going to be forced into this position. And I don't know. I mean, that you are in a no-win scenario. And Mike, I hope I'll type a message here just to make sure you know that I'm listening to you. So, just to make sure that he knows. Okay. So yeah, that kind of thing. It's a tough one, man. And as somebody who, honestly, my area of law does not deal with these sort of issues that much. But ironically enough, the one time I did go to the Court of Appeal was dealing with something that was way out of my context. It's all statutory construction and anybody who's dealt with how statutes are put together, that the people who do the bills and the things like that, they come in here and they, people lobby about what the bill is going to be, and you've got legislative intent, and they're trying to draft these things in a way so that when you read the laws, it's clear and it's easy to understand. They talk about the clear and plain language of a statute, which is when the courts are trying to interpret this stuff, that's what they go to first. It's when things are uncertain that you get into these weird areas where they've got to go back and look at the legislative intent. And when I was reading that thing about the Egan decision, they're kind of talking about what was the intent of the legislature when they did all this stuff, when when Article 2 was done as versus Article 1 and that sort of thing. So it gets really deep in the weeds on this legal stuff, and I don't want to bore you guys with this stuff for another 30 minutes. I'll close up by saying that I think it comes to a head eventually. I don't think there's any way to avoid it, because sooner or later somebody's going to try this. And hopefully it comes out like a declaratory relief situation where, and I say that, and I'm about to get to something Eric Burleson said during the event. And I applaud Eric Burleson. Well, you know what? Let's get to Eric Burleson's statement, because there's stuff about what he said as well that I want to talk about, and that sort of thing. And I mean, the legal stuff, and Mike, I thank you here. You answer my questions. I also want to point out, let me just put this on the screen. What you said that I agree with. Don't set people up for being tossed in a meat grinder. Appreciate you talking. Hey, Mike, look, like I said at the outset, I know you got here late. I don't like to advertise too much what I do in the real world, because I just don't think it's relevant, but it is here. And this sort of situation is very nuanced and complex, because anytime you're getting into the constitutional law aspect of things, it's confusing. And it is difficult to navigate. And I just heard, when this stuff first started coming up, I just heard so many people saying, well, shit, Kirk McConnell said it's this way, so let's do it. And that's great. I happen to think Kirk's right. But testing that out, taking the chance to test that out, who does that? Who takes that risk? That's a hell of a risk to take, man. And, if anybody like Mike or Dylan or Matt, like I said earlier, if they're going to say, what do you think? I'd say you cannot take that chance. You can't take the chance right now, not with the composition of this Supreme Court. Now, 4 or 5 years from now, when the court gets a different composition and it's a little bit more liberal, and this is not a political statement, please don't take it that way. I just think like maybe you get to a situation where it's a little bit different, and somebody who might lean more towards Congress if push comes to shove. Because again, like they said in Egan, the Supreme Court, for understandable reasons, does not want anything to do with this crap between the branches of government. And you can't blame them, because it's really just, it is not anything that you would want to get involved with. And even my dogs, they're upset about it, as you guys can probably hear. But anyway, let's go to the last thing that I want to talk about from the actual conference. And it is Eric Burleson and his very powerful statement at the end of this event that I thought was really interesting to listen to and kind of get into his mindset. And it does kind of tie into what I was talking about here with the legalities of all this sort of thing. Because, okay, hold on a sec. Let's get into what Eric says here. All right. Let me get on here. Okay. Where are we? There we go. All right. So let's listen to Representative Burleson and hear what he had to say at this event, because it's important as well. So here we go.
It's an honor to be with you today. Look, shortly after the film by Oliver Stone was released about the assassination of JFK, Congress took action and passed the JFK Disclosure Act unanimously. They wouldn't have done that had it not been for an outcry from the public that was demanding answers. And it's my hope that your film and others like it will create that kind of momentum and that outcry. Because the truth is, if there's any government that's holding information about the knowledge of whether or not we are alone or not alone in the universe, that is not for any government, no matter how powerful it is, to withhold from the rest of humanity. We are here to serve the people. This government belongs to you. You don't belong to the government. And never forget that. And so I'm here to serve you, to try to get the truth to the people. We're working diligently to do that in the committee that I'm on, and I have a responsibility in that regard. I want to say thank you to these courageous individuals, my new friends from Brazil,
Muito obrigada aos meus novos amigos brasileiros.
Thank you for your courage and your willingness to, risk your reputations and your careers for something that will benefit not just people of Brazil, but the rest of the world. Thank you.
Obrigado pela sua coragem de arriscar a sua reputação por algo que vai beneficiar não só os brasileiros, mas o mundo inteiro.
I want to say thank you to Kirk McConnell. He and others have been doing an amazing job at pushing this forward in a thoughtful way, helping people like me. I was a financial advisor and a software consultant, had no idea when I ran for Congress that I would be doing this. But folks like him have been extremely helpful, and I couldn't do it without you. Thank you. And Colonel, I can't wait to get to know you more. Thank you so much for coming forward today. You're an inspiration for the rest of those who have served. Courage is contagious, and you're an inspiration, and hopefully you'll compel more people to come forward. Appreciate that. We've been given marching orders. We have legislation that we need to pass. We've heard from a lot of witnesses. It's time for action, and it's time to get the receipts. So it's time to pass the UAP Disclosure Act. And it's time to pass whistleblower protection within that or a separate act. But I go back to my original statement. The reason why so much information is currently today being released consistently, that the agencies of this federal government never wanted to see the light of day, is because Congress took action, because the people demanded it. And I'm asking you, everyone here, and all the reporters here, and Leslie Keene, thank you for the brave work that you did with the report in 2017. You destigmatized. That one story destigmatized this entire topic and made it so that people could come forward. We need more people like Leslie Keene. We need reporters that are brave, that are willing to publish stories, and we need the social media warriors out there to continue to spread that information. Act and push on members of Congress, because otherwise they won't do anything about it. Thank you again, and I'm proud to serve.
So, Representative Burleson coming out firing. Very powerful statement, obviously. And the things that he said, courage is contagious. I love that statement that he made. And I know Pavel had basically put that in bold print on the episode that he did about that. The other stuff that he said is kind of calling on social media warriors to be the front line on this thing. And I think there's a lot more to that and that's not because I'm sitting here doing a live stream or anything like that saying, oh yeah, let's, march into battle. Let's be on the front line. But I do think it is a situation that he talks about 2017 and I draw this analogy all the time on the pro wrestling side of things, that I've said that the 2017 New York Times article was ufology's equivalent of the WWE network launching back in 2014. Like when the network launched and it gave everybody access to all this stuff and affordable pay-per-views and that sort of thing. And all these pro wrestling podcasts, including my own, popped up at that point in time. And the article in 2017, like he's saying, destigmatized the issue and it got a lot of more people involved. And you saw this big jump in podcasters, and not just podcasters, but really good podcasters covering this topic and really smart people who are looking at this, who are absolutely interested in this and trying to get to the truth of the matter. What are we dealing with? What is the phenomenon? What's the true nature of all this stuff? So you get these super smart people and these very passionate and dedicated people like UAP Gerb, who's out here doing stuff, Rob Jones, Jesse Michaels, really smart guys, or Jason Somoza, who are putting in all this stuff. You got guys like Pavel Ibarra, who I talked about, Andy McGrillen from that UFO podcast, Dan Zenderstrom, Tyler Roberts, Ryan Sprague, Joe Mergia, who I've talked about, just to name a few. That's certainly not an exclusive list. But you've got people like that who are smart and witty and willing to put in the work to get to the bottom of this thing. And that is a nightmare for the gatekeepers, in my opinion, because it is something that they can't really control, that you've got these private citizens doing all this work. And I know, like Matthew Brown had talked about during one of his live streams, that he thought, deep state, big government disclosure was dead in the water. And he's right about that. But citizen disclosure is alive and well. And it is this grassroots sort of research into everything that's going on that is likely going to be what makes a big difference on this stuff. And so I think Eric Burleson's onto something there by kind of calling on social media, podcasters, analysts, that sort of thing, to really be the front line and to do things that, the government needs. Their representatives got their hands full with a bunch of stuff right now. They may not be able to put in all the work. But one thing about Burleson that I did want to tie back into the last topic is that Burleson is, what I love about him is his dedication to this. And he just doesn't let it go. He keeps showing up on podcasts. He'll show up at X Spaces. He'll go on. He does all these interviews. I saw him on, with Andy, with Pavel, with other people as well. He's still talking about this stuff. Luna and Burchett have kind of gone to the back a little bit. Burchett, obviously, because he's now in charge of Doge and all that kind of crap. But here's the thing is, like, the stuff we're talking about a few minutes ago about the constitutional law aspect of things and this fight between the branches. At some point in time, if Burleson's really serious about this, then, once people accept that USG disclosure is over, we can start working on citizens. Don't fight the switch. Yeah, exactly. Mike's absolutely right about this thing. Embrace it. This is where we're going. This is the direction that things are going. People need to embrace that. But what I was saying about Burleson is that at some point, if he's truly serious about getting the truth out there, he's going to have to buck the trend of his party and go against the executive branch to get anything done. And that means going against this president who he's sworn loyalty to. I don't know what happens when you reach that moment. I really hope that he's got, because it will be very uncomfortable for him if it actually reaches that moment. He seems like a stand-up guy. He really does. But that's asking a lot. That's a big ask for a representative to say, hey, dude, go against your party. And because, if it does come to a situation where Congress is going to initiate some sort of suit against the executive branch for a determination as to who has the right to receive this information, who is the leader, who spearheads Congress doing that? I don't know, but it is something that I do wonder about, if Burleson is going to get to that point where the water gets a little bit too hot for him on this thing. I hope not, but we'll see what it is. But until then, you got to take your hat off to the guy, because he's actively out here trying to do what he can. Still fighting the fight for the UAPDA. That's his own issue. They keep trying with that thing, and it keeps falling by the wayside. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, whether it's, Senate staffers who are making decisions for people who, let's just say, may not have the capacity to make those decisions for themselves. And I'll leave it there for now. But anyway, that's kind of where I wanted to go with the summary of the James Fox Press Club event. It's been covered by a bunch of people who have done a better job of it than I have, a more detailed. They've broken it down into the minutia. I just wanted to do this to kind of summarize everything that I've learned in the last 6 days and kind of do that. But I will jump into something that I don't think has been discussed yet, and that's the event that happened yesterday called UAPCon. This was hosted by, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, UAPedia. So UAPedia is, let me look this up, a trusted knowledge hub for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So it's kind of cool. UAPedia is the world's first expert-curated AI-assisted encyclopedia dedicated to unidentified anomalous phenomena. Built by a global Guild of, let me read this. Global Guild of On-Topic Researchers, Editors, Authors, and Experts. It unites fragmented archives, government records, sensor data, documentary evidence, and credible accounts into a multilingual, evidence-based knowledge hub, at once bridging history, science, and consciousness to become humanity's definitive, transparent repository on the UAP reality. Sounds great, right? I mean, I've looked at the site. I heard about it from the Soul Foundation. I didn't know it was live yet until the event yesterday. It's very live, and there's some really cool stuff on there. And it's great that, and I understand the theory behind UApedia is let's have our own repository of information. It's Wikipedia without all the censorship and the skeptic gorillas and all the bullshit that goes on over there. So they're like, nope, we're going to do our own thing so that we can control our own narrative and the story that we want to tell, the information we want to provide to people who are really seeking the truth. So I get all that. I think it's a great idea. UApedia hosted UAPCon yesterday, and it was a really, really good event. There's something I will talk about in a minute that I wanted to get into more detail on, but I will say that, the panels that went down, we started off with the fireside chat with Jeff Nusatelli, who, of course, Jeff is one of the main guys out there who is really pushing for some of these issues. And his mantra that reality is classified, it's like burned into my brain. And it's just something that I hear all the time. And Jeff is really, he was heavily involved with the James Fox event, all the stuff going on in Brazil. Jeff was very involved with that. So I loved his fireside chat. It's always great to hear from Jeff on all these things. My favorite panel by far of the whole event was the panel with Paul Hynek, Rizwan Virk, and Daniel Bronco. And I love this panel because, and I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not sure I buy into everything. I think Rizwan Virk is a brilliant guy, and I love listening to him talk, and I like reading his stuff. And what I love about Rizwan is that he makes a very uncomfortable topic seem not so terrifying, if that's a good way to talk about it, because he's all about the simulation hypothesis. And Paul Hynek talked a little bit about it, a different variation, not simulation, but something a little bit different. Bronco talked about something a little bit different, but I think Rizwan is the one, that simulation hypothesis is the one that makes people feel most uncomfortable. And I get it. It is an uncomfortable topic to think like, holy shit, is the Matrix real? Or is it really just a simulation? Is there really nothing more to this? And I don't think it's that simple just to say it's a simulation. But it was a fascinating conversation, and I'm not going to give all this stuff away because it just happened, and I would urge anybody to go and watch the event for themselves. And when I actually put the episode out, I will post a link to it because I've still got it, and you can watch the replay. It's really, really a good show. But like this panel with Virk and Hynek, Paul Hynek, of course, J. Allen Hynek's son, and Bronco was, yeah. Yeah, I like what Mike's saying here. The fine line between madman and genius. Most of these folks are at least a genius. Yeah, they say stuff, but like when Virk was talking, and Alan Steinfeld's the moderator for this thing, and I could tell even Alan was getting a little bit uncomfortable about the conversation because it's not exactly, I don't think it's exactly jiving with what Alan's belief system is, and that's okay. That's okay, because you listen to this thing and you listen, and I urge anybody, go watch this yourself, draw your own conclusions. I saw somebody on Patreon on that UFO podcast. He made a comment that he checked out because he can't get behind the simulation hypothesis, and so he just checked out of the rest of the conference. I get it, and I said, I understand how it's an uncomfortable topic, a conversation, and it's not going to appeal to somebody, but there is, when you really dig into how the universe operates, and you get down to the quantum level, and I'm no expert on quantum mechanics or anything like that, but there's little things like, I remember the Tedesco brothers talking on that UFO podcast to Andy about how the phenomenon, when it's being observed, changes as soon as the phenomenon knows it's being observed. and anybody who studied anything about like quantum mechanics will know there's this measurement problem observation issue where things that are like, when they're not being, how people know that they're not being observed is beyond me. But as soon as you observe like a wave, or I think it's like a wave or a particle, it'll flip to the other one as soon as it's being observed. That's strange. But there's so many elements of the way the universe operates that is mechanical and structured, just like the way a machine would think. So sure, this shit may make you uncomfortable, and I get it. It doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy either. But there's something to that at least you need to pay attention to that. So the Verk Bronco Heineck seminar or lecture was really, really good. After that, we got into Whitley Strieber, Kimberly Engels, and Jeffrey Kripal. I mean, hey, look, that was worth its weight in gold, because you've got, Whitley is, of course, is a great guy. And, you listen to his experiences and things like that. Kimberly Engels has done a lot of work. Jeffrey Kripal is well renowned for the stuff he's doing at Rice and the Archives of the Impossible. That was a really good conversation. They closed up with Sean Espehorn Hargens. I don't know if I pronounced that, a PhD. Doctors J.J. Hertak and Desiree Hertak and Dr. Tara. And I'll get into something Dr. Tara said in just a minute, and then we'll close up. I'd never heard Sean talk before. He was really good, and he really summarized a lot of this stuff in a way like it was like a lightning round sort of summary of all sorts of various aspects of the phenomenon and things about that. By all means, watch Sean's summary of things. It is really good. And then they closed up with, who was it? The guy again. Thomas Brophy, Dr. Thomas Brophy, The Implications of the Phenomena on Science. That was really good as well. There's some really cool slides that he put out there that I would urge anybody to take a look at. But what I wanted to share from this is something that Dr. Tara had come up with. And I'm going to pull it up, and the full article of this is actually over on the UAPCon site, and I can put a link to it, but Dr. Tara's full article, which is much more deep, this is like the super Cliff Notes version of what's in her article, and it's just the basic bare bones sort of thing. But I want to pull it up here for you guys to take a look at. We don't even need sound for this. It's just a screen. Okay. So here you go. Okay. So yeah, the 5 stages of mindful disclosure. And I found this very interesting because it's like the general gist of what she was saying was that, where is this picture? Here it is. Okay. The general gist of what she's saying is that there's and I think this certainly steers into the controlled disclosure narrative much more than the catastrophic disclosure, because you can see it's structured and there's a staging to this thing. And we're going to go from one stage to the next, to the next, to the next. And I did have a bit of a problem with one of these. So stage 1, UAP verified, official confirmation that non-human craft are real. Kind of, sort of, that's kind of, sort of happened in some respects. I mean, at least like in 2021, the government admitted that the videos were real. But I want to skip down because she's like, okay, stage 2, NHI confirmed, unequivocal statement that we are not alone, or NHI announces himself. It's what we're all, so many of us are pulling for, right? To have some sort of statement. The president saying we're not alone. Now, whether anybody believes that or not is another story. NHI announcing themselves, a little bit more difficult to ignore, that sort of thing. But, so that would be stage 2. So the first stage, non-human craft are real. I'd say that that's kind of sort of already happened to at least a certain extent. Unequivocal statement, we are not alone, that has certainly not happened. Stage 3, species and agenda, revelation of multiple NHI types with varying intentions, agendas, and dimensionality. So we're merging a bunch of different concepts there. You're merging extraterrestrial hypothesis, the rumors that there's multiple species on the planet, reptilians, mantids, Nordics, Greys, whatever the case is. And then you're bringing in this dimensionality, which goes all the way back to what we started this whole conversation with Jacques Vallée. Are they interdimensionals? Are they extraterrestrials? Are there ETs with super advanced AI overlaying them? I don't know. But here's the part that that I had an issue with it, and if Mike's still listening, he might agree with me on this one. Stage 4, tech and secrecy. So an admission of decades of secrecy and advanced technology possession plus psiability. Now, with the exception of the psiability part, I don't see how you get to stage 4. Stage 1 and stage 4 have got to go together, right? Because I don't see how you admit that there's craft of non-human sort of thing without kind of acknowledging, a non-human craft without at least acknowledging the fact that, hey, we've been reverse engineering this stuff for years. We've got advanced technology. We've got possession of this stuff. We've got black triangles. We've got stuff flying over Kansas, over Area 51. They've taken pictures of this. So I don't see how you can confirm that non-human craft are real without saying at the same time that there's been a decades-long program of secrecy, reverse engineering, black tech that people have, even if none of that stuff's true, if it's all just ours and it's all our secret stuff and it's all our black tech, then at some point you got to come out and say, you know what? Yeah, we're like 50, 100 years ahead of what we're letting you guys know. The psiability is a different story. That gets into a more difficult conversation as far as whether, Mike. Yeah, so I'm going to put this on the stream now. Stage 4 is never happening. Even stage 1 will never happen based on if aliens are real. Their tech is what will create the world leader. Military assets, it's a black hole there. See, I tend to agree with Mike on this one. I don't think, like, if you're looking at this thing from a standpoint of a natural progression of this sort of thing, then yeah, I don't think you get to stage 1 without at least addressing stage 4. I mean, stage 2 and 3, sure. If you can get beyond stage 1, then you can get to the other ones. But I think Mike's probably right. You don't get to stage 2 or stage 3 until you address stage 1 and 4. And that's a big problem that you're going to have to try to deal with on this thing. In stage 5, our cosmic origins and experiences, evidence of NHI's role in human evolution and abductions have happened. Okay. That's its own rabbit hole, of course, and it delves into concepts and things about, were we placed here by an advanced civilization many, many eons ago? Are we like Anunnaki, descendants of Anunnaki? Have abductions, have they happened? Probably. I think there's enough accounts and enough information about that to sit there and say, hey, there's like a very strong probability that some of this stuff happened. All these people can't be crazy or imagining all this stuff. Something happened to Betty and Barney Hill or Travis Walton or some of the other more well-known cases. But it's an ambitious sort of flow chart, I guess is a good word to say it, like, that Dr. Tara had come up with here that says, if we can get to this stage, we can go to this stage, and we go to this stage, we can go to this stage. It's not going to be that linear. I don't think anybody who studies this topic as much as I have, or as much as some of the other guys have who look into it, it's just not going to flow this linearly. And I applaud Dr. Tara for putting the work in, and her article goes into this in much more detail. And this, like I said, this is just a stripped to the bones version of what she came up with. And I applaud her for giving the thought to how do we approach this? What's the best way to approach this sort of thing? And here's my take on it. And it's not a bad plan. And she's covered all the bases here and that sort of thing. It's just that the odds of it going and flowing in this sort of direction, as it's going to go from here to here to here to here, very unlikely in my opinion. But like I said, UAPCon was really good. I would certainly urge you guys, go and check it out. There's a lot of stuff that's worthwhile there for anybody interested in the conversation. There's a lot of stuff about consciousness, and that's great. There's stuff that Kreipel and Whitley Strieber and Dr. Engels came up with that is absolutely worth checking out. And I'm just not going to go into a bunch of detail about it because I think people need to watch it on their own and give UAPedia some love. Go and they're even taking, asking people to participate and that sort of thing. that's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I want to thank you guys for, tuning in and checking this thing out. And I know the live views are going up as we speak. And of course, I want to give a big shout out to Whistling Mike out here for jumping in here and engaging with me. Thanks, Mike. I don't feel so lonely now. It was good having somebody to kind of banter on with and answer some questions and that sort of thing. And the guys they typically do unidentified history with, they would normally jump on, but yeah, this was a little bit of a heavier sort of episode, so I kind of dropped this on them at the last second. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and found some useful information out of it. There's some cool stuff coming up, man. UAP Summit's coming up in a couple weeks. That's going to be very scientific and technical. And I could probably put a link to that in there. That's February 7th and 8th coming up. It's a online thing. The speakers on this thing it is loaded. Burleson, Nolan, Fowler, Ryan Graves, Beatrice is going to be there. Richard Dolan, the Tedesco brothers, Robert McGuire. I'm just like going through the speakers here. It's a literal who's who of just people that you've heard. Keith Taylor, people like that. It's going to be a great event coming up. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for the show. Hopefully we will see Mike in the next panel. It'll be awesome. Also coming up in about a month, and I don't know if anybody else is going to be there, but I will be going to the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, February 20th through the 22nd. So if any of you guys are going to be there, man, shoot me a message. Let's get together. It's going to be a great event. That's got some heavy hitters. It's going to be very consciousness based, but there's, as far as the panels that are going on down there, you got Rizwan Virk will be there. Steve Bassett will be there. Linda Moulton Howe, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell will be there. Paul Hynek will be there. Ross Coulthart will be there. Danny Sheehan, Thomas Winterton from Skinwalker Ranch. And it's pretty affordable. I think I got like a 3-day pass for $125. Man, you're lucky to get that's way cheaper than Contact in the Desert, or even they got an event going on in San Diego this week, and it's a lot cheaper than that. So I urge anybody, if you are in the LA area, check out the Conscious Life Expo, and if you're going to be there, let me know, because I'd love to, get together with some of you guys. But that's going to do it for this episode of Unidentified History. If you guys want to interact with me on X, then give me a follow. It is at AttitudeAg. That is at AttitudeAGG. By all means, check out the website, attitudeofaggression.com. All of Unidentified History is there. The wrestling podcast is there. We relaunched Game Gone Wrong to cover the new Game of Thrones spinoff series, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So we got all sorts of fun stuff happening over on the website. And of course, check out the YouTube channel, the Attitude of Regression's YouTube channel, which has episode shorts and even a couple of shows that I do on the side that we've started to record that I don't necessarily advertise under the Attitude of Aggression brand. But they're still cool, like Bandwagon Nerds, at Bandwagon Nerds. If you're into pop culture and geek culture, check that out. We got the sports podcast. I'm too busy. That's all I know. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was great getting a chance to talk about this stuff and get this out there. And I will be talking to you guys really soon. Until next time, keep your eyes up on the skies. Keep your eyes in the seas. You never know. People say you never know what you're going to see, and that is very true. But until then, stay safe. It's crazy out there right now. Please stay safe. Stay warm. There's a lot of snow. I will catch you guys soon for the next one. We will be coming back. Last thing I want to say, I do have every intention on doing the Kenneth Arnold sighting when we get back to the history aspect of Unidentified History. This was a little bit of a different episode, but we will be doing the Kenneth Arnold sighting. That is coming up next. Until next time, guys, you guys take care of yourselves.